Oh, it should. Oh, there it goes.
Naughty.
All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have the distinct honor of interviewing the team behind RoboDoc, the creation of RoboCop, an exciting documentary that is coming to Screenbox in 4 parts, and it's debuting August 29th. So the fellows that I have with me today are Chris Griffiths and Eastwood Allen. They co-directed this documentary, and it was produced by Gary Smart. So thank you all for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me about this exciting project.
Thanks for
Pleasure.
having us.
Thank you.
And Gary, I've known you over the years. I think we first connected on social media way back when Leviathan was out, because I'm a huge Hellraiser fan. So I've followed you ever since, and you've done lots of exciting projects since then. And you three have teamed up on several of those projects, including the Robert Englund documentary that just came out and the Pennywise documentary, and both of which have received great reviews. I've not seen the Fright Night one, but I hear that's also excellent. So, but what, for people who don't know, what goes into creating something like this? I mean, this seems like it's even bigger than your other documentaries, because this is 4 parts. I mean, in total, how long are we talking for this documentary?
In terms of production,
Yeah.
the production has been maybe 7.5 years, maybe. That obviously involved about 6 months pre-production. So it was never intended to be 7.5 years. It was always intended to be a year. So yeah, it's a mammoth task, really. And I think it's kind of evolved, and I'm sure lads will obviously interject, obviously, with more detail on that. But it was originally going to be intended to be a normal doc, like Leviathan maybe was, more like Bruce, sorry, 2 hours maybe maximum. And it just evolved and evolved and evolved. And when we look now that we've had obviously Pennywise and Hollywood Dreams come out before obviously this, and this was made before those films, long before. I think that's a testament of the hard work, really. I think the length in time of making it is not anything to do with laziness or anything to do with complacentness. It's about sheer blood, sweat, and tears. It took us 5 years to get Weller. And that's not an excuse saying why why it's taken a long time, but we were fighting for literally for 5 years to get Weller involved. So this is not your normal documentary by any stretch, and even based on our past kind of experiences, we can blame COVID for Pennywise delay, and we can blame COVID for Hollywood Dreams. This is just an absolute beast, really, of a production, which has resulted in the first ever scene by scene dissection of any film ever. So yeah, that's my little tuppence worth, and I'm sure the lads will interject.
Summed up nicely there, Gary. As Gary said, it has evolved. There was the original intent of, I mean, for my end, it was like, I just want to do something to do with RoboCop. It's my #1 film, never a question about it. And we had already worked on both Leviathan and You're So Cool, Brewster. And it was whilst we were out filming You're So Cool, Brewster, we initiated a conversation with Ed Newmeyer. And then I told Eastwood, who I know is a big fan, who had worked on the Brewster doc as well. And it's just evolved. It's became its own beast. It kind of got out of control, and we've just been trying to tame this thing, hone it, shape it, and we kind of just went with it became kind of quite addictive, I think is the best way to put it. We had 16 people confirmed at the start. We came home with 60 interviews by the end of it. And it's like, holy shit, we've got almost like someone who represents every scene. Right, we've got to get all the other ones, And it just kind of evolved from a loving retrospective to like, no, let's do a real hardcore deep dive on a film which I feel deserves it, because it's just so multi-layered. You look at it from one angle versus kids. There's a great action film. You look at it now as an adult, it's prophetic, it's satirical, it's funny. There's just so many layers, and so I think it was a great candidate for us to kind of go on this journey with. It was just a very long and stressful journey, but we're here now.
Yeah, and we didn't, like Chris said, we didn't set out for it to be a scene by scene analysis. It just turned into that when we got the footage back. And obviously Chris had, as a person that was doing the interviews, Chris had written the questions to cover every scene that the people, the cast and crew were talking about, and what their experience of being involved in. and then transcribing everything, getting the footage back, and going, we've got every single scene here. What do we want to do? Let's go down the route of a full scene by scene analysis. But you'll see, hopefully, when you watch the documentary, we've not just ticked a few boxes by saying, oh yeah, we've got to put that scene in it because it has to have that scene in it. We found a way. We've plugged gaps as well where we've gone back, and that was the beauty about having Peter Weller last as an interviewee, was we knew where we wanted to strengthen some of the backbone and some of the areas that we'd not taken a deep dive on. So Weller basically, which was amazing because he's the main guy, Weller was plugging holes as well as giving us so much like fun insights and being super candid and energetic. And it's genuinely, I'm not just saying this because we interviewed him, but it's the best interview I've ever seen of Weller on RoboCop. We sat with him for 4.5 hours. He was scheduled for 4 hours. He gave us an extra 35 minutes, I think. We talked to him about RoboCop in depth. Chris and I, we gave him props. Like we went through, we had A, B, C, D questions. We got through the entire list, and then we talked to him about RoboCop 2. So that was an absolute dream come true. But yeah, it's morphed into something that is an absolute beast. It's a mammoth. But I think when you watch it, you don't even have to be like the biggest RoboCop fan to get a kick out of wherever you dip in and out of. I think it covers that practical, 80s hands-on tactile filmmaking. And obviously the popcorn side of it, the satirical nature too. So we're going to say that as the makers and people that love the film, but I honestly think if you watch it as just a general film or sci-fi fan, you're gonna get something out of it as well.
That's great. And so I know what it's like to try and get someone to agree to do an interview. It took me 3 years to get Barry Manilow to do an interview with me, and 3 years to get Mick Garris, but I got both, and both were amazing. So with Peter Weller, what did it take? Was it a timing thing? Was it him not, initially not, interested or tired of talking about RoboCop? And how did you overcome whatever those challenges were?
I think it took a lot of just convincing, really. I think when we first started doing the project, I think because we'd only really had Leviathan and just Bruce was just coming out, I believe it was, or just was about to come out. Obviously, when we were filming, maybe came out a little bit after. I think, when someone like Weller, who's very kind of like articulate, obviously, at the time he was very plugging the Dr. Weller thing, regards to obviously, his Renaissance art kind of stuff as well. He wasn't interested at all in talking about RoboCop then, and it was very clear he wasn't talking about RoboCop. So to try and convince him then was really difficult, and we had people trying. And again, the lads will go into that. People like Randy Moore and obviously Ed Newman trying for us. And then there was emails going through. I ended up getting his personal email. And I wrote to him, and I got to admit, every single time I spoke to him via email, he was always courteous and polite. He always responded. I always had a response off him, and it was never rude or aggressive, which people make out they use sometimes. He was always professional and nice, really. About it. I know that he went to some conventions and some screens. People asked him in the audience, was he going to be in it? And he said no. And then he was going to be in Germany, and me and Chris and Issa were trying to plot about going to Germany to go and find him. I had this guy who knew what hotel he was in. It was all getting really looking weird.
Stalkery.
Yeah, and it was kind of strange. But then it was a no. And then in the end, what happened was, again, the lads will probably say more about this if we've got time, is that we were invited to the Love of Sci-Fi in Manchester, isn't it? Manchester in the UK, and Weller was there as a guest, and the organisers, who we've known for a bit, we were quite good lads, basically asked Eastwood and Chris to do the Q&A with Weller, unbeknownst to him who these two guys were. Mate, do not tell him who these were. And it was only after that, and again, it was a weird interview, which the lads can tell you about, but after that interview, when we kind of cornered him and introduced ourselves, I think that connection happened then a little bit, in terms of obviously him seeing a face and knowing that these guys knew their stuff, and actually realised there was over 100 people across the franchise involved. And that started the negotiations then. And it was from that literally grabbing him under the stage and basically saying, do you know who we are? I think it was Eastwood went up to him and said, do you know who I am? And then Chris went and spoke to him after at his table. That really, within 3 months, we had him, I think, confirmed and contracted. So I think, again, it's like persistence. And someone said earlier on a question about, what can you advise you give to documentarians independently, and that persistence. And I think this really shows that, and when people ask us, why didn't you get so-and-so? Why didn't you get this person? We try everything to get these people. It's not our fault sometimes they don't say yes. And I think this proved the point, obviously, with Weller, You just got to keep on trying. So that it just fell into place. I think that's what it was, in terms of that getting to nitty gritties on contracts. It fell into place, and he was very happy to oblige in the end. Yeah, that's the official story. I'll tell you the real story later.
And then it was just time for. Then it was just time for Chris and I to get giddy once that interview was booked in, and unfortunately, it was during lockdown, because I think we would have tried to get over to LA if we could. It was filmed in Burbank. We had a friend that filmed it for us, but we were on a screen. We had an iPad, I think, or a phone, and we were on the screen, and we were feeding Weller the notes, and we were chatting to him, and we had him for 4.5 hours, and Chris and I were like texting as Weller was giving the answers, because his answers are not one word answers. He goes into depth. Chris and I were just like, "This is awesome!" Emoji, like cool emoji. We were just like absolutely buzzing. And that was an absolute dream come true. And I think the fact that it took us so long, and then there was that cathartic moment of like, right, we've got him, and then we're just thinking, right, is he going to give us something? And it was the best interview that I've heard in when it comes to RoboCop. We went in so much depth. He was so like lively and just like buzzing and bubbly, and the fact that we were equipping him with sort of anecdotes and stories from the past that he'd forgotten, with notes that we had, and it was awesome. Like, so that was to wrap up the production with Weller was incredible. And then it was a case of, right, we've got to put him in a documentary now, because we had the doc done without Weller, where we used the Weller archive. And then the best part for me as the editor was basically going, right, let's remove the archive and put in the Weller interview. That was just like so much fun, and it's definitely elevated the documentary having his interview in there.
The final piece of the puzzle. I think naively we thought for ages, because of course everyone was vocal, like, oh, well, you don't have Peter Weller. It's like, well, we're bloody trying. And I think naively we thought, well, yeah, we don't need Weller. We've got some archive stuff. We were given some stuff, and everyone else is fantastic in it. And then kind of now just seeing it, there's a part of me going like, yeah, how naive we would have been to just think, yeah, I actually do genuinely still think it would have worked without him, but as Eastwood said, it really did elevate it. And I think to be in that situation of being able to sort of retrofit elements, certainly like the back and forth we love. So certain people had said this about him, and we were able to we plucked up the courage to say, oh, some people said this about you. And now we've actually got a response, a back and forth. So it's a nice sort of balanced sort of element to it, really, in terms of, topics.
That's fantastic. Congratulations for being able to pull that off. I know what it's like to have to chase someone down, but like you said, persistence pays off. So that's really fantastic. And so this documentary, it's 4 parts, as we talked about, and it's like you said, it's really unique because it's looking at the entirety of the movie. It's not necessarily looking at the entire RoboCop franchise per se. It's really a deep dive into the film itself. So how did you decide to, I guess 2 questions. One is, how did you decide how to break up the 4 parts so they would make sense? And then you said you interviewed Peter about RoboCop 2. So does that mean that this documentary maybe at the end touches on the sequels, or, what came after the film and kind of what it spawned?
So the sequels are another project. So we've got, let Gary speak to that, but this one covers the first film. We do talk about basically, we wanted to cover the sequels, but from the perspective of people that worked on the first film. So you get the writers and creators talk about the sequels, and then that's it. We've got documentaries planned for the sequels that are going to be far more in depth. In terms of like the episode, splitting it up for 4 parts, I think I just sort of asked or requested that as long as it's not, if the episodes had to be bang on 60 minutes, because they're not at the minute, they're like 1 hour 6, 1 hour 9, 1 hour 20, 1 hour 18 or something like that. If it was stipulated that it had to be 60 minutes, we would have struggled, because it would have been retro. It would have been going back and taking stuff out. So Screenbox and the distributors were fantastic and just said, basically, you split it into 4 parts. So we just picked the best points. So episode 1, I don't want to spoil it, but it gives you a tease for episode 2. So it was picking relevant points that were going to, leave people satisfied, where it doesn't just cut mid-subject, but it was something that that would give you that gear shift when you do return to the next episode. So that was the plan. So luckily I had the flexibility to play with some of the run times, which I think you obviously get now with on demand and streaming and digital. It's not as rigid as it was back in the day of like TV with commercials and that sort of stuff. So I'm really pleased. I think I think the way that it feels episodic, even though we didn't set out for it to originally be episodic.
I think we've, as you say, we've been really lucky with Screenbox, you know, because we had debates and arguments, if I'm being honest now, looking back, about the length of this project, and you know, and we were trying to force it to be 100 minutes because that was the norm for documentaries 2 years ago. That's changed now. Even the last 2 years, it's changed. But you know, and we argued with, well, I argued particularly with Eastwood and obviously with Chris about the length, and Eastwood's insistent on 4 hours. And I think having Screenbox come on board has been amazing because they've just let us, you know, have free reign really in terms of, you know, allowing it to be an hour and 20, an hour and 18. And I think the weirdest thing for us is that we've interviewed over 100 people, and this is just the start. You know, Screenbox have optioned season 2 and 3, which cover the second film and third film, the comic book series, the TV series. We've got interviews with everybody from those as well. Again, it might not be the same format in terms of a scene by scene dissection, but there's lots of wealth of stuff we've got there, particularly on 2 with behind the scenes footage, 3 with behind the scenes footage as well. We've got some great people from the TV series. So I think it's an exciting kind of start. This is really regards to our RoboCop kind of world, and RoboDoc about this is going to be a free season approach really over the next 3 or 4 years. And hopefully with Screenbox, you know, they've got first refusal on season 2 and 3. So yeah, Chris,
it's really exciting.
Dreading that.
Yeah, very excited to check all that out. And so, I mean, obviously, highly encourage everybody who, if you don't have Screenbox, sign up today and make sure that you're ready to stream this August 29th, episode 1. But for those who are, you know, just are in love with it and want to have that like physical media or a digital copy that they own, is that also going to be an option? I know it's happened with the other documentaries you've put out. Is it going to be available for video on demand and physical as well?
Yeah, so we've been told obviously to plug today as well, obviously, that not only is it on Screenbox, it's also going to be available episodically on Apple and on Prime as well. So people, if you haven't got Screenbox, you can go through those as well via Screenbox. They're putting it on Apple as well and some other streaming platforms. Also, in terms of obviously the physical release, it is going to have physical release, collector's edition, and a steelbook. That again needs to be confirmed, but it's very soon. I think it's been leaked on the internet at the moment, but obviously there's confirmation needs to come from Screenbox. But again, what we love about Screenbox is that they are really keen on physical releases. We know, and a lot of people would have took this to streamed it, and that would have been it. And the same with Pennywise, and the same with Hollywood Dreams. They like the physical. And the package they've done for this, and the artwork they've done, and they've used some of our original artwork, which is great. Eastwood's been very heavily involved in terms of the box, the artwork on the cover with Chris as well. So you know, we've had real input on that, which has been great. UK wise, with Kaleidoscope taking it on board, so that's going to be released again as a 4-part series and a Blu-ray. Well, I think we've just commissioned the artwork on that. Maybe, I'm not sure. No, I'm thinking about something else. That's coming next week. I think the artwork on that's coming to commission. So yeah, it's going to be that physical release soon in the US, on demand, streaming via Screenbox, and also UK, and then the rest of the world obviously is in negotiation at the moment. So yeah, so it's going to be a big release for us.
That's great. That's awesome that you guys have that freedom through Screenbox, and you know, Screenbox has been making a big splash lately with all these documentaries that you guys have been producing. And it's wonderful that there's that restriction, that because people do want to, I mean, you know how fans are, right? Like, we will not only subscribe to Screenbox, but then we'll buy a physical copy, and then we'll also buy it on iTunes. Like, we will literally buy things multiple times because we're passionate about something. We want to support it so you can continue to create more wonderful projects in the future. So I guess, you know, just kind of winding down, just a few more questions here is, so for RoboCop, for me, this movie was a big deal, and I probably shouldn't have watched it as a kid. But when I did watch it as a kid, just the music, the violence, the you know, unique humor, just everything about it was just memorable. Why do you think this movie was so important to analyze? And was this movie taken as seriously as it should have been back when it was released? Or do you think it's only over time that people started to really appreciate just how exceptional it is?
I think it's how prophetic the film's become now that it's garnered more respect over the years. I think at the time, you know, critically it was well received, and I think everyone was able to pick up on the fact of certainly what Verhoeven brought to the table with his sort of anthropological view on the United States and everything like that. It's one of those films where, to be honest, you know, like you, we saw it as kids. And so as a kid, it was this great, fun action movie. And I think this is why I hold it so high, you know, as my number one film, is it's a film we've all kind of grown up with. It's that film we all saw at too young an age because it was marketed to kids. And it did, because, you know, you could easily pluck out, oh, he's a bit like Iron Man. Bam, let's put him on lunchboxes, make cartoons. The title is as goofy as they come. So whenever I tell someone my favorite film's RoboCop, you do get that kind of, really? But you then feel compelled to sort of justify, go, no, you've got to understand there's more to it. And I think that's kind of why the format we've taken really kind of showcases that this felt, you know, we look at it from a technical standpoint of a bygone era of practical hands-on filmmaking. And there's so much to sort of unpack from that, but also on another way that it's like, oh, shit, this film's actually very intelligent, very smart, and much more to it than the title suggests. The title's kind of accepted now, but at the time, you know, if you'd said to your parents you're going to see a film called RoboCop or watch a film called RoboCop, and they were ignorant to it, they'd think, oh yeah, he's just watching another superhero film. But it's not. It's so much more to it. And I think that's just why it's such a great film and sort of so exceptional, and why it's kind of held itself, really, especially now because you're looking online and people refer to it. I mean, I ravenously search on things like Twitter or whatever it's called now, what Elon Musk calls it. You know, I search RoboCop documentary to see, oh, what's being said about it. And so often you'll see these posts going, I just watched this documentary called RoboCop, because it's so foretelling of what the world's like today. So people sort of, it's got a kind of new audience in that respect now.
I'm back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you, Gary?
Sorry to cut you off. We have time for one more question.
Sure. Well, so the only, for whatever reason, in my mind, another movie that I compare this to, in its feeling and vibe, I guess, is I always loved Darkman, and it kind of was a similar time period, but it had that dark comic book feel, which that was obviously more of a comic book, literally, but it had a similar style to it, and I feel like we kind of gotten away from those types of dark, gritty, kind of hero type movies that we used to have with RoboCop, Darkman, and others. I'm just curious. I mean, I have a feeling all three of you guys are probably fans of Darkman as well. Am I right? And do you kind of see the parallels between those movies and that kind of style that seems to kind of be lost?
100%. You know, the whole revenge and finding oneself and everything like that. I mean, Darkman's got a bit more of that zany Sam Raimi feel to it. But I think actually I always remember kind of whenever mentioning RoboCop as a kid, Darkman would get brought up. I think I saw the second one weirdly first. Durant Returns, is it? Or was that the third one? But when I finally did watch Darkman, you know, yeah, it's hard to not draw the parallels of these, you know, non-massive, you know, I think the thing is kind of Darkman came from the aftermath of Batman, especially having Danny Elfman do the score. But it's superhero for adults kind of thing that just so happens to then infiltrate. Oh, well, it's a superhero. Boom. Yep, we'll sell it to kids.
Yeah, that's a great point, because nowadays Marvel and all that, it's kind of become a little more sanitized. So it's not exactly as appealing, I think, as those films. But this has been great talking to you guys about RoboDoc. So everyone, make sure to go to Screenbox, check out RoboDoc, the creation of RoboCop documentary, 4 parts. First episode, August 29th, and then the remaining 3 episodes, new one each week. So thank you so much, you guys, for your time. Really appreciate it. Chris Griffiths, Eastwood Allen, and Gary Smart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, mate.